Hello everyone and welcome back to the Prado Museum. We are here for another of our weekly sessions in English with the American Friends of the Prado Museum, and today we are in the gallery of classical sculpture. And we're going to have a closer look at a small replica, a Roman marble from the 2nd century AD of the Athena Parthenos. This sculpture dates from about 130 to 150, and it reproduces in miniature a famous original by the Greek sculptor Phidias of the Athena in the Parthenon. This Prado version is about a meter tall, just a little bit less than a meter tall, and it comes to the Prado from the royal collection after it was bought by King Charles III to help expand the sculpture collection. Now, Phidias was one of the most important sculptors of classical Greece, and his work on the original Athena Parthenos was absolutely legendary, and it probably took him about 10 years to complete. And that statue was chryselephantine. And this means that the core structure was wood and it was overlaid with ivory for the skin and gold for the garments and armor. Now, ancient sources such as Prado and Pausanias give us descriptions of that ivory skin, the gold in Athena's garment and her armor. Like I said, this is a miniature, so the original stood about 11 to 10 meters tall inside the Parthenon. So here we have some images of the place that we would have found the original Athena Parthenos and what she would have looked like, covered in ivory and gold with the wood structure. It was installed in the Parthenon in 438 BC, and it was kept there as a symbol of Athens until the 5th century AD, and has been one of the most admired works in antiquity. Now, in Greek mythology, Athena was a goddess, and she's deeply tied to this idea of wisdom and governance and strategic virtue and war. She was the daughter of Zeus and of Metis, and one day Gaia gave a prophecy to Zeus that Metis' offspring were going to overthrow him. And to avoid this, Zeus devoured his lover and their unborn child to prevent this from happening. But Athena continued to grow inside his head, and Zeus ended up having a headache that was so intense that he asked the other gods to help relieve his headache, and so they opened his skull with an axe, and out of his wound sprang Athena, fully grown and dressed in armor. Now, we know her as the protector of Athens, although she had to compete for this position with Poseidon, the god of the sea. Now, according to mythology, the two gods clashed in this attempt to be the patron of the city of Athens, and both of them decided to give a gift to the people of Athens, so the people would decide who they wanted to have as their patron. Poseidon struck a rock, and he turned this into a font of salt water, which symbolized naval success and control of the sea. And Athena gave an olive tree that symbolized a land of prosperity and peace. And of course, the Athenians chose Athena, which is why the temple of Athena, the Parthenon, was dedicated to Athena, and hence the name Athens. And we can see the story of this conquest, this contest between Poseidon and Athena in the pediment of the Parthenon as well, which you can see today in the British Museum. Now, the Prado's Athena Parthenos is a small replica, like I've said, and there are dozens of small replicas of the Athena. But together with one other statue in the National Museum of Athens, the Varvaikon, which we can see an image of here, together with this statue, the Athena Parthenos here at the Prado is one of the most faithful reproductions of the original. It preserves many of the features that we know from descriptions and from other copies, such as these vertical and deeply carved folds in the drapery that give the figure both dignity and this sense of natural movement as well, and this movement in her knee. In her face, we can see the long-faced canon that was typical of Athenian art in that period, and the crest on her helmet, although this is something that's been restored in the 17th century. Athena is grand and majestic and solemn, and we can see that she's wearing this wide peplo, this is the name for her garment, that is cinched at the waist. and it falls to the ground in the form of these tubes that are so clearly defined and separated from each other. She's wearing her characteristic attributes, like the aegis, which protects her torso, like armor. Like we said, Athena is the goddess of war, and she was born as an adult and wearing armor. And on the aegis, there's a brooch that shows a Medusa, and this is because Athena defeated the Medusa. On her helmet, there is a sphinx that represents her wisdom. So we have all of these details, these attributes that come to us directly from that original Athena Parthenos sculpture. And here in the work of Phidias, well, a replica of the work of Phidias, we can see this interest in representing life and the natural world, the advancements of classical art, and this natural movement, this placement, beautiful placement of her leg that gives her this sense of dynamism. And it seems like her clothes are just clinging to it so naturally, as if she's actually moving. In fact, Phidias was known not just for being such an amazing sculptor, being able to reproduce life, but actually being able to reproduce this otherworldly feeling of the gods. He was the sculptor of the gods. And so we can imagine this natural movement in Athena in the temple of the Parthenon, in the temple of Athena, and the massive size that she would have had. The effect probably would have been absolutely terrifying. We can see some images of what the inside of that space would have looked like. Now, over time, many classical sculptures lose their extremities. This is some of the easiest parts of sculptures to break away. So we can see that some bits of Athena have broken off over time. We have to remember that classical sculptures are typically found in archaeological excavations, normally between the 15th and even the 19th centuries. And so something that's from the 2nd century obviously is going to have some pieces that can fall away over time. Now, if we follow the iconography of the original Athena, this sculpture would have had a shield that was decorated with war scenes, and on the other hand, there would have been, this would have been resting on a column, and on top of that hand would have been a statue of Nike, the winged goddess of victory. And to give you a sense of how large the original Athena was, just that winged statue of Nike was over 2 meters tall. So a really, really massive sculpture in the Parthenon. We also know from studying other copies that there were probably griffins that were carved in the helmet. And Pausanias described these griffins from these ancient texts. Pausanias said that these griffins probably represented her relation to the earth. Remember that in her gift to the Athenians, she gave them an olive tree in contrast to her competitor Poseidon, who's representative of the sea. Now, much that we know about Athena Parthenos comes from these ancient writers and studies of replicas like this one. But this statue is more than an archaeological curiosity. It shows how Greek ideals of beauty, power, divinity were transmitted through Roman culture and then later through European collecting in the modern area. So while she's a smaller version in marble, this is really a great way to imagine the presence of that massive, colossal Athena in the Parthenon. Thank you for joining me for another video, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.